Welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the show where we discuss matters of local, national, and international political significance in a controlled and restrained way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury in a
Do you
controlled
own
and
a
restrained
suit?
manner. Sorry, that makes me chuckle.
Do you own a suit?
uh, no. Um,
Now, good
so,
Lord, what a week it's been, eh, Simon?
yes, politics. Well, as Steve Pitt himself said in the budget meeting on Tuesday, "May you live in interesting times" is a curse.
It is.
And I think it's not the first time I've said it on the show. Could I please have some boring times? Although, to be fair, they would be pretty
No,
lame episodes of the pod, so maybe not.
exactly that. Exactly that. So our options this week were to cross the pond, um, which we have decided strongly against, and we're focusing on matters close at home. If you're listening live, you know that it's Sunday, the 3rd of March, which is when we're broadcasting this. And if you have the podcast in your ears, then it gives you the idea of what a week we've had. But focus this week on Portsmouth, the
Yes,
the the budget,
the budget. So
possibly.
So way back in Tuesday, which was the 25th of February, and it feels like quite a while ago now. We're only on the 2nd of March, but I don't quite understand. January felt like it lasted for 3 months, and February felt like it lasted less than a week. But here we are. So Portsmouth City Council's full budget took place on Tuesday. The administration brought forward their suggested budget for the financial for the years basically 25, 26 and beyond. And unsurprisingly, there were some amendment suggestions from other parties, and there was discussion about whether those should be accepted. And maybe some were, maybe some were. There we go. That's it. Done. We're done, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably more to it than that. And
Okay.
interesting, for those who haven't followed along with this before, this is an annual ritual where usually every party suggests an amendment that would be beneficial to the local residents who they might want to vote for them. So it can be a little bit of a leaflet generating meeting, but with no elections in Portsmouth this year, we should take that all of the amendments were good, honest, well-meaning things coming forward, and we'll see where it all went. Although I think it is also fair to say that this meeting is probably the conclusion of several meetings that have gone before in what used to be dark, smoky rooms, but now probably just dark rooms. Or
Yeah,
even
well, there's
virtual
definitely no
rooms.
smoking inside council buildings. That's for sure. But when and where the conversations take place is an entirely a matter for speculation. Although in previous years, to be fair, there's been a bit of drama as one party or another has claimed to have been left out of the conversations ahead of time and been blindsided on the day as to what's happened. I think over the last 3 budgets, differing parties have actually claimed to be in the disadvantaged position. So, should we get to the headlines of what
Let's
the
have a look at the
administration
headlines.
are talking about? So, probably the easiest thing to talk about is where it hits the public. So the easy one to remember about is the highlights is that there are £110 million worth of savings since 2011-12. 50% of that is of controllable spend. Adult social care is now about 60% of controllable spend. And the 4.99% increase, so the maximum the council can have as an increase without either some sort of permission from the government or actually a referendum of the public, 2% of that passports to adult social care. So I won't read out how that affects each individual band of property, but if you're in a band D, that makes your total council tax, including the police and fire, £2,181 a year.
Yeah, and I think that, again, the 4.99% is probably the least surprising part of the outcome ever. And I do wonder whether, this, and I think we touched on it in a previous show, whether, people have just got to get used to the fact that every year your council tax is going to go up by 5%. It's just what happens, you know. And again, I think and it will be another show. I think April is going to be a fascinating, slightly scary time with the fuel cap going up, your council tax going up by 5%, and then the impact of the national insurance and the rise in the living wage, which I'm sure the administration must have touched on as to how that impacted them. But with all those in play, um, councils are left with three options, aren't they? Which is, please, central government, can we have some more? Which tends not to be successful. And then it's the raise council tax and try and reduce spending at the same time, as you said, with that headline figure, of 110 million down. So it kind of feels like the 5% rise might just be something we get used to every year.
I think there's certainly a narrative about that, and it basically talks about. I think that speaks to the conversation that did take place in the chamber about the reduction in funding of local councils over the last 10 years or 10 or 14 years, and how.
Oh, you can't say 14 years. It makes
15
you
years.
sound like Sakir Starr. 14 years of Tory. Stop that.
Or indeed how that's going to shape up with we won't go into it in detail here, but the local government review and the devolution kind of package. So there's all sorts of stuff to talk about with regards to that. But I'll carry on talking about some highlights of the administration's point, and then I'll play you a clip of the council group leaders, Steve Pitt's speech about the budget. Put my teeth in. Right. Okay. So I'll run through these quite quickly. So spending 25-26, total increase in spending of 18.8 million, provisional sum of 3.5 million as revenue contribution to capital for future capital investment. Overall contingency provision to cover known and anticipated financial risks, amounting to 22.2 million, especially those relating to the volatility and inflation and increasing demand around adult social care and children's services, and adjustments to pension costs, forecast borrowing costs, investment rates, and £2 million worth of savings proposals. They're actually set out in a bit more detail, and I'll speak to those. I'll speak to those actually now, and then go on to kind of. There's another bit about funding. So the savings, there's a total of £2 million worth of savings, which is 1.3%. But the highest kind of saving percentage-wise is in planning policy and city development, which is a saving of 5.9%. I mean, it's only £85,000. Well, only I say, but it's still the highest percentage. The next highest one was in transport. It's about 356,000, which is 4.1%. So various kind of other savings across the board, but climate change and greening the city, and culture regeneration and economic development, and housing and tackling homelessness aren't their portfolios aren't going to need to actually find any savings. So lighter savings elsewhere, about kind of 1% or thereabout in things like central services, in families and education, in healthcare, in community wellbeing and healthcare, and in environmental services. So yeah, some kind of like some interesting things there. I didn't find any. They might be there somewhere, but I didn't find any detail as to how those kind of that sort of savings were going to be found in planning policy, and why that had a bigger saving, because I thought there were issues with trying to get things through planning.
And I guess the challenge is always with these. It's understanding the mechanics and Portsmouth City Council is a very big organisation with complex structures, and so knowing how these will be found, there probably isn't a massive headline figure somewhere. It will be made up of dribs and drabs, and adds up then to a whole heap of beans.
Yeah, just going to share a comment that we've got from my pal Foot. I'm not quite sure of the account name. Suggesting it would make better sense to bring all social care in-house, so we're not propping up privatised services and invest in community wealth building and use participatory budgeting on housing at 1%. So, yeah, an interesting point there.
Yeah, I think there's always there's always a presumption, isn't it, that bringing it in-house would be cheaper and outsourcing it would be more expensive. I think I don't think either solution is always right. We've never circled back round, or I haven't seen anyone circle back round to see bringing the waste management contract in-house, whether that saved us money or cost us money as an organisation. And but yeah, it's all of these things need to be looked at.
Yes, indeed, and yeah, I think there's impassioned arguments for one side or the other, but rather than an ideological statement as to whether they should be in-house or privatised. I think the interesting thing is the opportunity to look at what the opportunities are and whether there is a true benefit, whether that's either in-house or outside. It might be, for example, there are some things that are particularly specialised and therefore you need external expertise. And they follow up their comment by complimenting you on your cat.
Yes, that is Enid Blyton, who is very politically astute, and joins us for
giving Enid Blyton giving their view as to what it is, and savings. Let me just kind of I'd looked at the savings, but the funding bit. So funding for 25-26, an increase in funding from government of 11.2 million, with 5.2 million of that provided for social care. So that's quite a hefty chunk of that additional funding. Underlying business rate income for the period shows an increase of 2.5%, but that's largely reflective of a 1.7% inflationary uplift. The increase, as we mentioned before, of the overall council tax of 4.99%, yielding 5 million. An increase of council tax base equivalent to £1,040.60 in Band D properties, resulting in an additional 1.9 million. One-off surplus in council tax collection fund of 2.4 million, and one-off surplus on the business rate collection fund of 1.2 million. So those are kind of the headline summaries that were in the documentation. So we hear what Steve's got to say about it.
Yeah, let's see what Mr. P has got to say.
The new leisure centre build at Bransbury Park will commence later this year. The complete replacement of the original roof on Mountbatten Centre is nearing completion, and the Lido will reopen to celebrate its 90th anniversary. Combined with our schemes to refurbish outside courts and play parks on a rolling programme which commenced last year, this council is putting the health and well-being of all our residents front and centre. With the looming threat of LGR and the potential future demand for investment across a much larger portfolio of sites, this investment now has proved prudent and should help to future-proof our provision for years to come. We're continuing the process to replace the civic offices before they get to the point of no return and place huge demands on our resources. With LGR, some might question whether there will even be civic offices in the civic centre, or whether the new council may decide to relocate them elsewhere. But even if that should happen, we need to deal with our existing building, and therefore officers have been instructed to develop plans that can be adapted later in the planning process if needed, perhaps to provide council housing instead, allowing the scheme to pivot if a future council decides to change the plan. There is no do-nothing option here. Similarly, we are continuing to invest to create the right platform for the City Centre North scheme to progress, whilst recognising that other partners and government investment will be required to fully realise the vision. We must be shovel-ready when the financial climate improves and grasp the opportunity to unlock thousands of new homes. With the new devolution plans, the City Centre North scheme is exactly the sort of project that we would expect to see infrastructure investments through the Mayor targeted to. We have passported funding for SEND directly to education, along with a multi-year provision for the first time for school buildings maintenance, giving officers more freedom to target resources more efficiently and more effectively. Similarly, the transport team now have 3 years funding to enable more efficient commissioning and less delay in scheme delivery. Our limited capital resources do not really allow us to move beyond the areas of work already either in train or essential to enable us to continue to deliver services.
Steve, and I think it's probably worth us, we have touched already, for those of you not familiar with LGR, it is local government reorganisation, which Hampshire has signed up to with the offer of, do you want to be involved or do you want us to do it to you later? Not much later by the government. So that kind of shadow hangs over a lot of what Steve said there. But I guess there's some interesting points to pick out there, starting with the discretionary spend, which I know Steve is always kind of, kind of majors on, in terms of if all the council can ever do is pay for the things that must be paid for, then there's almost what is the point of council itself?
Yeah, I'm trying desperately to answer this without kind of veering into the LGR stuff, and that's the kind of fundamental thing, is that I know that we've spoken about this before. There's so much of council spending that is obligatory spending on certain things, and they're all valid things that need spending on, but they're not funded in their entirety by central government. And I think there's quite often a lot of misconception about just how much money the council gets, or where it gets all of that from. And I think there's a wider conversation to be had about if we actually want all of these things to happen, and most people do, because these are valid and important services that people rely on. Then it seems a bit, I don't know if dishonest is too strong a phrase, to basically push the delivery of that or the funding of that kind of down the road and leave that to local councils to actually fail at it, rather than what are actually really central services being provided centrally.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. It's that danger, isn't it? That with some of that stuff, it gets pushed down to the councils to manage the budget. You spoke about adult social care.
Mm-hmm.
Steve spoke in there about SEN. Those are huge numbers that the council has to deal with. And I guess if you follow the logic that money does come from central government, but is best administered by those closest to the point of delivery, it kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that element of, as that slice of the pie gets bigger and bigger, if the pie doesn't get bigger, then the discretionary stuff is smaller. Interesting point about the civic offices, because for those of you who are listening from outside of Portsmouth, we have a civic, the council offices are right in the centre of Guildhall Square. And I wouldn't like to think when they were built, but I'm going to guess 60s or 70s, Simon. Would that be fair?
I'm not sure, but they must be, given their design. Yes, they'd have to be.
And so the point I think Steve was making there was that, a big old chunk of money has been set aside not to do work on the offices, but to do the design and planning work to enable work to be done at a future date. And as I say, Steve referenced it in there, which is, well, as we don't know what the future of Portsmouth City Council might be, it's that if you do nothing for the next 3-4 years, the thing falls to bits. But you could spend a whole chunk of money making plans for a building that you're not going to need. So a little bit of a caught between two stools there for the administration.
It is a difficult one. Of the current building is literally beyond use, is expensive to maintain and to heat, isn't fit for purpose, and has more space than the council actually needs, and can't really be repurposed for anything else, because basically the building's in such a state. By the way, a quick Google tells me 1976.
There we go.
So within our lifetimes, I just can't remember it because
the long hot summer of 76.
Yes. So yeah, there's a big thing there, but that again, I think it's hard to kind of. That is also tainted by the decision of then what happens with local government reorganisation. Will you need offices in Portsmouth, or will you need offices at all of that sort of size? And if not,
Well,
okay, where? So there's
yeah.
all of those things. There's a lot up in the air, isn't there?
Well, and I think there's never been the bottoming out of the COVID is over, come back to the office conversation, has there? Again, just up the road in Titchfield, I see that there is strike action planned because the Office of National Statistics have said, we really want you back in the office 40% of the time, which is 2 days a week. And from what I understand, the staff there have said, well, actually, we really rather prefer working at home 5 days a week. No, thank you. And I know that, we've got a similar situation with the council offices. And, there is it is that dilemma in terms of, well, how big do you build your office building for? Is it for Tuesday and Wednesday when people come in, or is it for Monday and Friday when suddenly everyone works from home? It's a complex question with no easy answer. But let's move on to what other parties tried to sneak in with no reference to leaflets at all this year. So what have you got, Simon?
Well, I was going to say there was no sneaking because everybody puts the amendments in and they're there in writing. So there's no sneaking, but there is also no as you say, there's no leaflet writing. So the next one I'm going to look at first is the PIP amendment. So I'll go through that. I'll read out what the details are, and then I'll play you a clip from the PIP leader George Madrick, kind of going through that. So the PIP amendment basically sought to reduce the amount going to the reserves by 209,000. But their big statement of what they wanted to do actually in their budget was they said that what they'd done is actually looked at all of the stuff that had been passed by full council over the last couple of years, and actually tried to bring those into their budget, so actually find money for those things, because quite often council motions are so on a day-to-day on a normal basis, the council motions from anybody can't suggest that can't say that the council does X, Y, Z unless it also identifies how to actually pay for it. So that means that what you end up with having is that actually council motions that come to full council are usually about, could the council please go look at trying to find a way to fund X, Y, Z, or could we express support for X, Y, Z, rather than we should go do this, because if there's no way to identify how to fund it, then that's not kind of, that's not kind of a reasonable thing to do if you've kind of set your budgets and then you have the whole argument every full council meeting about what you spend your money on. So anyway, this was pretty much a list of a summary of those things. So 40,000 on a paperless council. So basically stop sending papers to councillors in dead tree format and organise them to receive them all digitally. 6,000 to promote, spend 2 pages in the local magazine Flagship that the city council produces, promoting local produce. We did a show last year about local producers. I'm sure that's a subject we can visit. 2,000 for a local produce package for the Lord Mayor to give to visiting dignitaries when they come to the city. Quite often we get people from other cities or from places outside the UK that come to the city, and I think the idea here is it would be nice to send them away with a basket of stuff that's made from or in Portsmouth. 25,000 for Women's Hub. There was also subsequent years funding. 2 remote community wardens for Portsmouth North, 112,000. I don't know if you can recall, there was quite a conversation in several full councils about them being centrally located and sent out to where they're needed, rather than actually already perhaps being in the north of the city or indeed in the 3 wards that are off the island. £10,000 for the promotion of Portsmouth women in sport and their facilities, and 14,000 for improving the equipment or replacing parts of the building in Paulsgrove boxing gym, and basically taking some money out of the civic office relocation. So that you'll see a theme in here that there's quite a lot in basically don't spend so much in looking into relocating the civic offices because you don't need to right now. Seems to be the kind of the theme that everyone was suggesting. So that was a reduction of 300,000 on the civic office relocation. So that was theirs. Should we hear what the man had to say himself?
Let's have a look and listen to see what George says about this.
Once again, another Labour motion, the promotion of Portsmouth females in sport. I definitely think that was Councillor Valley's, and we have provided £10,000 in year one and £10,000 in year two to fund local females that want to get into sports, where local clubs and local sports people can apply for funding to support females so that they can have free access to sports in our city and to encourage more females into sport. And finally, obviously, the boxing club. I don't know if people know that in Paulsgrove, there's been a little bit of an issue recently with the boxing club and their structure. And obviously, because the Paulsgrove Community Centre is coming to its end of life, there is a current plan, which I appreciate Councillor Sanders giving a briefing to us ward councillors the other day on the future of Paulsgrove's Community Centre. That was really appreciative, and it sounds very exciting. However, in the interim, the building is bad. There's a gable wall that's basically stressed, and everything's having to come off the wall. The issue is with that is that it does provide sports 5 days a week to some of the most vulnerable children, not just in Paulsgrove, but across Cosham, Wimmera, and Drayton and Farlington, Hilsey, Nelson and Copner as well, I believe he said. And there would be up to 600 children affected if that had to close or lower its services. And we've been told by our officers that they need a new structural place in there to remove the things off the wall and create a freestand in there so that it can keep running. So that's why we've added that in. So hopefully our budget isn't too contentious. As I say, we've tried to do it really cross-party. We've tried to basically, I think my gripe and some of our gripes have always been that motions never tie the hands of anything. So we always say, oh, we support this, we recommend this, we like this, it sounds like, but some of them never actually end up happening through budget pressures. So we basically tried to address that today to basically wrap up the last 3 years since 2022, and every single motion, as I say, that we've approved unanimously as a council is funded through that.
This amendment was one that got quite close to my heart, Simon, as two diligent local commentators who often have to sift through the nonsensical virtue signalling that is the full council meeting. Fair play to Pip, who went through and plucked out all those things where people said ground gestury things, and the council unanimously, in a non-party political way, said, yeah, we should do that. And kind of these are almost a little bit of a sweep up of all the things that everyone agreed we should do, but haven't quite got round to, brackets, probably because there was no money at the time. And I think from memory, hearing the first part, that the plan was not to stop the civic centre works, but just to slow it down a touch by not investing as much money in the front end in the next year or so.
Yeah, I can't remember whether it was George or one of the other Pips that went on to explain that would only just delay things by about 6 months. So it wouldn't really make that much of a material difference overall.
So it would seem to me then that all of the things that, and I think there was a couple of references in there to Labour motions and some other party motions. So my guess is that one got through.
Do you want me to tell this now, or do you want me to tell you this at the end?
I guess you can tell me at the end. We'll keep it on a cliffhanger.
Spoilers.
So who came next?
So if our viewers would like to tell us in the comments whether they feel that they would have supported that, whether that they would have wanted that to go through, then let us know in the comments. So next let's go to the Labour motion. So So Labour, so They wanted to reduce the transfer to reserves by 33,000. And that would enable them to give a £30,000 grant to Connor's Toy Library, £3,000 to have a study into have raised zebra crossing at Lawrence Road. They also wanted to take out 68,000 from the civic office relocation. But they also wanted to have additional lighting in Cornwallis Crescent, which is 10,000. Safety bollards outside the Lawrence Arms and the Nell Gwyn public houses, which was 5,000, and refresh the play equipment for school age children at Canoe Lake Splash Park, which was 20,000. So some kind of various things there of a community and kind of social focus, but a similar sort of thing of let's put away less money into the reserve and let's reduce the amount that we're investing in trying to look at the what next for the civic offices.
That one had that, and forgive me, Labour chums. That one had more of a feel of the more traditional. Can we have a couple of nice things in the wards which we hope to win elections in? But none of them bad things. You could never say no. Do not refresh the play equipment for the tiny children. So I will not speculate as to whether that one got through. But
would we hear what Charlotte had to say on it? Charlotte Chirala, the leader of the Labour group.
Let's hear from Charlotte herself.
At present, there's a really big gap in safe crossing points on that stretch of road, and we've had hundreds of residents contact us with their concerns about their safety. Thirdly, additional funding for street lighting at Cornwallis Crescent in Charles Dickens ward under the street lighting item in the budget. Residents there have shared concerns about poor lighting, which is making them feel unsafe and unable to venture out of their homes at night. Fourthly, we are requesting additional funding for play equipment replacement budget items, specifically £20,000 to increase play equipment for preschool children at Canoe Lake Play Park. This is in response to hundreds of parents contacting us with feedback about the new play equipment there being less inclusive to preschool age children. So this will help to address that. Fourthly, something that has been already agreed is the joint funding between the Leaders' Budget and Cosham SIL to install power columns at Cosham High Street. So this involves the installation of feeder pillars for the supply of power in pedestrianised area of Cosham to enable market stall holders to easily access power. So this will have a really huge impact on the activity that could take place at Cosham High Street.
Interesting. I didn't see the Cosham power column thing in the actual document, so I don't know quite what happened there. But yeah,
more power to Cosham is what we say. For those of you who have not been watching, we are both Simon and I are Cosham residents, so our partisans,
which is still in Portsmouth. Someone tried to tell me otherwise on Facebook this week.
Oh dear God,
I know.
What's up with these people? So there's Labour, and I think Conservatives.
So we've got a Conservative motion. And forgive me, I haven't got a clip for it, but I'll explain why in a minute. And then after that, there was another motion actually from two of the PIP councillors, and I'll quickly go through both of them. So the Conservative motion was to basically reduce the civic office relocation by £162,000 and to resurface Kenyon Road in Copner, £50,000, and traffic calming in Sywell Crescent in Copner, £112,000. So, as you say, fitting into the model of straight, these are things in wards that we represent.
Yes, no, £162,000 for Copner, focused. So yes, that's clear. And Pip came back for a second bite of the cherry.
So this one was from councillors Lee Tyndall and Brian Madrick. They wanted to reduce the amount going to reserves by 1.8 million, and then had all of the agreements increase the amount going to reserves by 1.8 million, and still have all of the things that were listed in the original PIP amendment, and then basically just take 1.9 million out of the civic office relocations, and basically
right. So this was the Armageddon motion, wasn't it, for the civic office restructure,
let the bloody thing fall down motion.
Yes, that was the let's nuke them all and let God sort it out. So I and again, I guess we're going to get on to what happened with all the different motions. I'm going to speculate that this one didn't make it.
Okay, so the Conservative motion, the Lib Dems agreed to subsume.
Oh,
So they took that straight on board and didn't need to vote.
So that's 162,000 for Copner and
Yeah.
162,000 out of the embiggening of the civic offices.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
So
Keep it
the one we just did, the Tyndall and Madrick Senior motion, that fell. The Pips predominantly voted for it, and pretty much everyone else voted against it, with only Councillor Cal Corkery and the Lord Mayor abstaining. So that was the.
And I think we probably saw that one coming.
Yeah, this was it has been quite a kind of common thing somewhere. I mean, do you remember in kind of several years when the Conservatives were the opposition party, there would be a motion, I think, was it from Councillor Swan and Councillor oh good grief, I can't remember his name now, I'm so sorry. Atkins, sorry, Matthew Atkins, which was literally kind of a hard line Conservative point of no, just don't spend money, and therefore we don't need to increase. There was usually kind of a motion from within the party as well as the actual official party motion. So I think this is kind of something similar. So at the end of the day, these are all options to go before the council and be discussed, and the councillors arrived at their conclusion. So that one didn't go anywhere. The Labour amendment fell with basically Pip and Labour voting for it. And essentially the Conservatives and the Lib Dems voting against it, and Cal Corkery and the Lord Mayor abstaining.
Well, again, I guess it was a potpourri of things. And what was which only gives us the
Pip
all
amendment.
kinds of everything we all agreed to do motion from Pip.
Yes, and that motion also fell with Pip voting for it, and a similar sort of thing. We had abstentions from the Tories, from Cal Corkery, and from the Lord Mayor, so 6 abstentions and 27 against, which were Labour and the Lib Dems, which, as you say, was interesting.
It's
considering
very peculiar
the nature of the amendment.
and sometimes it does mean that you scratch your head when you look at this, because and I'm not saying I'm not aware of the roads in Copner, but it seemed very strange that there was £162,000 laying round for a couple of roads in Copner, but there wasn't a similar sum of money for all the things we had all agreed on were useful and noble and splendid things that we should do.
Yeah, it's a strange one.
Does it smack of gesture politics?
I don't kind of know how to kind of quantify it, because, as you say, it's on one hand, these are things you'd already previously agreed from. Now someone's giving you the opportunity to vote for them, but
pay for them. More important,
to pay for to pay for them to allow them to happen. So it does seem kind of a bit strange. However, the administration's response will put a different spin on this. So essentially, as well as subsuming the Conservative amendment, what in Steve Pitt's winding up, what he agreed to do. I mean, he spoke about basically we can't just leave the civic offices kind of rotting. It's going to cost us more money in the future. Essentially, he made a. Well, I've got a kind of clip, kind of summary of it, so we can assume that he agreed to fund the study in Lawrence Road from Labour's budget amendment, agreed to funding the lighting at Cornwallis Crescent, and agreed for the bollards, and the funding of the play equipment at Splash Park. So remember, that's all the things in the Labour motion.
So he didn't agree with the motion, but agreed to do all of the things
things that were in
except
it.
the Cosham power arrangements.
His response to the PIP amendment, however, was that his point was that why spend that money on a paperless council when councillors already have the option to not receive their papers as papers? So that doesn't actually cost any money. Just don't have them in paper if you don't want them as paper. But he made the case that some people need to have them in paper to be able to work through them and to understand them. With eyesight or neurodivergent needs. So he also pointed out that it doesn't cost any money to actually choose to use 2 pages of flagship to promote local produce. We just tell them to do it and they'll do it. It's not going to cost us extra money. The pages are already in the budget. They're already in the cost of producing the magazine.
But I think the proposal was that the vendors could have the advertising space for free.
But even so, you just set aside 2 pages and give them to them.
No, I guess yeah.
Without impacting any existing kind of advertising that you've got. So with regards to products for visitors, and although I didn't have a clip of Simon Bosher's speech, the leader of the Conservative group, he made a very interesting speech that was pointing out the problems that might cause with regards to exporting products into the EU, as we're obviously now that we've left the EU, which I thought was an interesting point. And he picked some other kind of points about the PIP's motion, about the community officers, and saying that the numbers didn't add up, and that the figures presented would rely on them working 7 days a week and not taking any holiday, etc. But with regards to products to visitors, Steve Pitt said that he's actually already got money for that actually in the twinning budget, so town twinning, and with regards to remote community wardens, there are improvements about community wardens coming, but he wouldn't go into kind of more. It basically was reluctant to set in motion a situation that would essentially change the kind of the warden's model. And Lee Hunt had made actually a more kind of detailed speech intervention about this, not minded to add wardens that work differently to the others essentially. So, and as to regards to the female promoting females, Portsmouth females in sport, there's already Sports Council funding with that criteria, and in fact was actually underspent in the current year. But he will fund Paulsgrove, the new equipment or amendments to the building at Paulsgrove Boxing Gym. And he also mentioned about there's £15,000 in the budget for improvements at Gatcombe Park, which he's happy to bring forward. So after all of that, everybody got more than a little bit of what they wanted.
Everybody got something.
But they got more than something, didn't they? Most of them got quite a lot of what they actually wanted.
Yeah. No. I guess it's the. I mean, there's some, and yeah, I guess the interesting piece for me is that each of the groups suggested what they wanted and suggested that they'd be paying for it pretty much, unless I misread it, sending less to reserves and trimming a bit off of the civic centre arrangement. And I wasn't keeping up with the cost of all of those things, but it feels like there must have either Steve had some spare money down the back of the sofa, or there had been a little bit of sandbagging somewhere that has enabled him to go tick off quite a chunk of that list. And yeah, I'm guessing if you added it all together, you're probably looking, well over $250,000 with all of the things that got across the line. So I guess everyone and we all lived happily ever after. ... Or maybe not ever after.
Well, and this is the thing, and it was mentioned, it was that shadow that was hanging throughout the debate, was this could be the penultimate budget that Portsmouth City Council has.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is the great unknown, isn't it? You know, when you talk about 3-year funding strategies, when you talk about projects like the big new sports centre that's been knocking around for a good couple of years, you know, these things don't happen within one fiscal year, and yeah. So did Steve end with a spectacular mic drop event?
So I've got a clip of Steve's kind of ending speech, which I well, I'll play it and we'll see what everyone thinks.
You know, I know our Labour colleagues find it quite difficult that the government is getting a bashing at the moment, but this is literally, we're at the end of the road, guys. When the new government came in last year, Labour government was in the emergency room with an attempt to try and resuscitate it, and that's been going on ever since. Everyone was absolutely desperate to see a change around, and it's not only not changing around, it's still going in the wrong direction. So the battle that we all know is currently going on between MHCLG and the Treasury. I absolutely need Angela Rayner to win that battle, and so do all of you, because Rachel Reeves is wrong. She's making the wrong decisions about LGR. We're going to have a debate about that in a minute, where I'll try not to blow above blood vessel. But also, she's making the wrong decisions about core funding for local government. The LGA has been absolutely clear that if things stay as they are, the deficit in funding for local government across the country by 28-29 will be £8 billion. So it's not a case of Angela and her civil servants going into the Treasury and saying, we've got to do some nice things for local government. Rachel Reeves needs to understand this is not just nice to have. This is absolutely flipping essential. And if they don't do it, all of us are going to be sitting here joining the conversation with Hampshire and Southampton and everyone else, wondering how we've gone bust. And it will be this government's fault. You know, I know our Labour colleagues find it.
It was so good, he started to play it twice. Well, what strong words indeed from Steve Pitt. And again, this is a teaser for next week's show, where Steve will be joining us, and hopefully as impassioned and energetic as he is there.
Yeah, indeed, and he can then point out to us all the things that we missed, I guess, about the budget, or why certain things were done a certain way. So I'm sure there was that'll be it'll be good to hear where we were wrong. But it's yes, I think we look forward to inviting Steve back next week, because it's quite a thing that's been apparent in lots of the speeches that he's made in several meetings since December. About the issue, so it'll be really good to hear straight from the man himself.
Yeah, and I guess it's in our, you know, the debates that we've started to touch on with devolution and local government reorganisation, which is that, you know, in broad terms, and I might be a few million out here and there because the numbers keep changing, but Hampshire is 195 million in the hole. Southampton is 165 million in the hole. So I don't know, 175. So effectively, and Portsmouth has run a balanced budget. So if you bring those three organisations together, apologies to the Isle of Wight, but I don't know their position. But if you bring those three authorities to the table, you start at minus £370 million. So, you know, that's the deficit that you're starting with. Now, for me, you know, as with every with every reorganisation, you know, whether we look to make savings and efficiencies, and I think it's sparking a lot of passion in Portsmouth, and who better to give us, well, at least what they know, than the leader of Portsmouth City Council himself. So really looking forward to next week's show.
Yeah, indeed. Really so.
Perfect. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian. Who have I been? I don't know who I've been. I've been Ian Tiny Morris, and without a suit.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Join us next week at 6:27, live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. Please do remember to follow, like, subscribe, etc., and follow the links if you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter. Email so that you can hear what's going on and perhaps make suggestions of questions or future guests. So we'll see you next week.
Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.